Well, welcome back, and my name is Matt Ditzworth. Today is June 30th, 2016, and it's 6 p.m. I'm talking to Ray Rogers tonight. Ray is a U.S. Navy veteran and a speaker. He primarily speaks to veterans about transitioning and also about career growth. Ray covers topics such as networking, elevator speeches, applying leadership skills learned in the military, and he's also developed a training package that can be used by job fair candidates. Welcome to the show, Ray. How have you been, and what have you been doing today?
Well, Matt, nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. As always, busy studying the next thing. I actually I spent time with Toastmasters, and today was an installation of officers at one of the clubs in my area. It was fun. I took the next area director. That's the job is called area director, and that's what I've been doing for a year. And so I took the next one with me, and she actually did most of the work. So it was the perfect kind of transition.
Good. Yeah. So that's one of the things. Transitioning military, we understand, is training your replacement, right? Training somebody who can take over so you can move on to the next thing in life, right?
Absolutely. You can never be promoted unless you have somebody to follow in behind you.
All right.
At least that's the theory.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. And if you don't mind, what Toastmasters club do you belong to?
I belong to Scripps Teasers in Scripps Ranch, which is in San Diego, California.
Okay.
So the club's been around for over 30 years, and is just the history is not so much made up in the people as made up in that we've been here, kind of have depth. It's good, back to good turnovers.
Really good, yeah. Okay. You know what? I'll ask you a little bit more about the Toastmasters in a moment. But right now, I was just gonna see if you'd tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into speaking as a medium to helping veterans.
Well, it's both a long and complicated story and short and sweet. The long part is that I actually started in the 90s when I was on shore duty in the Navy. I was a trainer, a master training specialist, and I acquired a bachelor's degree in workforce education and training. When I got out of the Navy, I actually put that on hold because I became a software test engineer, and I did that primarily from networking, which is one of the reasons that I talk about it. Just recently, as I've been progressing with Toastmasters the last few years, I've started doing professional speaking series of speeches as Toastmaster training, and it got me really interested in where I was going. As you were talking about when you introduced me, I have one of my networking speeches is called Networking to the Differences, which is also a training venue. And I talk about the fact that many of us have things in common with others, and that's how we network. We have things in common in our community, in the veteran community. It's often that our status as veterans. It's the fact that we've been of service to our country. So I tend to be able to connect with those people better, although that's not always the case. But my jobs as I moved along in my career in the defense industry since I got out of the Navy have almost always been brought to me by people I know. And they're people that I share some common bond with, yet we're different. The last was stumbling into somebody I met from Toastmasters.
Really? That's pretty interesting. Yeah, a lot of run into people all the time, and they say it's a small world, and so no matter where I go, I find somebody that I've known somewhere else too. So, well, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks. So what about your skills? This is kind of, I know a little bit about Toastmasters too. I with Vapor Trails Toastmasters, and so I was wondering if you'd tell me a little bit about that, and the Toastmasters may be part of this question or part of the answer, but what have you done to improve your speaking skills?
That's a good question. The Toastmasters is a large part of that, and that's primarily because it's one of the most integrated training experiences I've ever seen. Every part of Toastmasters is really focused on the people who are doing the first manual, Competent Communicator, and the first 10 speeches. Once you've done that, you're either kind of in or out. And and those speeches go from an icebreaker where you're just, the entire purpose is to stand in front of a group of people and introduce yourself, to the final speech, which is about twice as long and is an inspirational speech. And then there's a collection of manuals, 5 speech manuals, that cover almost every variation of speaking that you can imagine, from professional speeches, kind of a general professional speeches, to humorous speeches and technical speeches and speeches by management. And done many of those manuals as I went along, which each one of them was a piece in improving my speaking. The other things I've done is I participate in courses that require me to speak on a regular basis, technical courses, technical management courses, and things like the Dale Carnegie Human Behavior course, which requires you to do speeches almost every session. You do a speech. The last time I did it, once you've signed up and done Dale Carnegie course, you can always go back. When you go back, you coach it instead of just participate, so that you get something out of it and you get a chance to give your experience back. So I just recently did that again. Anytime I can get in front of students and people is part of my improvement in my speaking ability. And I had actually hit a point when I got out of the Navy that I was really struggling with speeches. I had a lot of negative input in the last year or two I was in the Navy, and I was struggling to stand in front of people and speak, and I had to do it for work and for other things. And Toastmasters got me past that, allowed me to redevelop the speaking skills that I had when I was younger, and start to hone them. I actually didn't finish my Toastmasters tour at that point. I didn't even finish the first manual that year. I got busy at work and took several years before I finally got back to Toastmasters. But since then, I've progressed along. I'm nearly complete with the training program the first time, having done about 50 speeches at Toastmasters and that many leadership projects, often which include speaking in addition to the actual leadership of it, a lot of impromptu speaking. It's been a fantastic growth process. And then just recently, I've joined a course called Paid to Speak, being with, again, as with other things, it was a networking opportunity. As leadership in Toastmasters, I happened to be talking to another leader in Toastmasters who was putting on this course and invited me to join the course. Like so many things, it's who you know, and it happened to be the exact right time. Yeah. So I'd say there's a long story to all these things. There's also the short version, which is it's always amazing what the universe lays in front of me to do next. And I can always tell when it's the right thing because it's very direct and very easy to find. I'm not stumbling around trying to elbow my way into a new thing. It's sort of handed to me. All I have to do is the work.
Okay. Yeah, and actually, as you were talking, I was going to ask you that, is to say something like that. Is that natural, something I've been thinking about lately is kind of natural leadership or living life in that natural way instead of forcing everything. I know that people have forced their careers or forced things because they want to do it, and they do everything they can to make it happen, but it's really not what's in their cards or in their path, and it just doesn't work out, and they don't know how to get on that natural path, and so it's just one of those things. I was going to ask you if this seemed and you already answered the question, was did it seem like it was a natural path for you? And this so definitely did. What about the Dale Carnegie thing? Is that a club, or is that more of a self-paced?
It's a commercial enterprise. Yeah, it's a commercial enterprise. Dale Carnegie, if you don't know who he is, was a writer and a trainer in the early part of the last century. He was teaching public speaking was what he was, the classes he was teaching, and he discovered during the course of teaching these classes that there was just a huge need for people to understand human behavior and understand how other people worked and how to work and play with others well. And as he discovered the need, he found that there wasn't any other material addressing that need. And over a period of many years, he kept putting together lectures and small courses and bigger courses and more writing, and eventually he had the material that became How to Win Friends and Influence People. So I find many people remember that title of that book. They don't know who Dale Carnegie is, but they know the title of that book. It's one of the pivotal writings of the last 100 years, I think, because it's such a focus on how to work and play well with others. That title says it all: How to Win Friends and Influence People. So he, as I said, he was a trainer, and his company that did the training still is in existence. It's called Dale Carnegie Institute, I think. And they have public courses, and they have courses at companies. My engineering company, Aerospace Engineering, Northrop Grumman, provides training and will pay for courses like that. And that course gets brought into the office, and we spend 8 weeks once a week for 8 weeks attending class for 4 or 5 hours a night, and paid for by the company. And there are a lot of others. Dale Carnegie puts on a lot of others, but as I said, it's a commercial organization, and they have really well done training enterprise. So I highly recommend it if you can find a way to take the class. It's really a great growth opportunity, and since I work with engineers a lot, it's really important for them to learn how to talk to other people. It's a struggle for engineers.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's one of the key, to me, that's one of those key elements of life, I think, is that communication piece. Not only, with the networking, but being able to communicate your needs or your wants, as well as listening to the wants and needs of others, and being able to communicate that through any kind of means, and networking being, probably one of the most important things for veterans. Would you agree with that?
That's important for everybody, but it's a struggle in some respects for veterans, because when you join the military, the first thing you do is give up everything that you had before and how you approach your business, and your communication skills change. You learn to speak acronym-ese. We can once you've been and they're not fully interchangeable from service to service, but it's amazing how many are close enough that we can figure it out. But you can spew whole sentences, sometimes paragraphs, that would not make sense to a civilian, because it's all acronyms that are very specific. Some of them to the military, some of them to our specialty. Those are the kind of things that make it hard to network. And plus we have a way of communicating with each other that's different from the way civilians communicate with each other. And part of that's just the structure of how we work when we're in the military. So when we're transitioning out, learning to communicate with civilians with younger civilians, and often they're going to be younger than the military people who are doing the transition, because after you've finished a few years in the service and a few years of college, you're now a few years older than your compatriots who are first starting out in the company. There's all kinds of interesting things when it comes to working with people transitioning, but learning to communicate, learning to translate all those acronyms and military job titles into something that makes sense to civilians, recruiters, managers, and the like. They all need to be translated before they can get it. And it's
so it sounds like Toastmasters and something like Dale Carnegie could be good for the military. Transitioning. Also for people probably on active duty, it could help them, but for sure transitioning military people can learn some of these skills through that. So I will.
Sure, speaking skills are critical. Yes. Yeah. Speaking skills are absolutely critical for all of us. That's a part of the job growth things that I talk about. Developing yourself within your career is another art form, and it's different for civilians than it is for the military. In the military, we have a very didactic method of going through things. You either get promoted or you don't, and it's oftentimes based on boxes that you can check and you understand, and they're very clear. It's a lot different for civilians. It's a lot more wishy-washy and less clear-cut. So learning how to progress in a career includes adding a lot of skills, and public speaking, and speaking and thinking on your feet, and doing impromptu speaking and things like that, which are skills you can learn in a course. But the nice thing about Toastmasters, and better than Dale Carnegie or better than a college class of public speaking, is that it has longer legs. You can spend more time working on it over a longer period of time. And all the experts always say the same thing: you can change any habit, you can build any skill, but it takes tens of thousands, depending on who you're talking to, which expert you're talking to. But the longer the range of the work that you do, the more consistent you are over a longer period of time, the more likely you are to be successful at adding a skill like public speaking or impromptu speaking and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, and I heard of a book I think it was called Learn Anything in 20 Hours, but it was in that book he said basically you can learn anything you want to learn in 20 hours or less, but you're not going to be an expert at it. To become an expert or considered a master, you have to study for 10,000 hours, or study and practice for 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah. And it does. It takes time to spread out over time also.
Okay, so that's great information on helping people, get those skills. So I appreciate that. And I've gone to a new question here, and so I was wondering about any favorite stories that you like from your life or someone else's life that you maybe heard, or a book or something, some stories that you read or read or have lived yourself that enhanced your speaking or used to enhance your speaking to veterans, if any come to mind.
Yes, actually, it's part of my network discussion when I talk about networking to the differences. As I was beginning my career in aerospace, I was also in a Boy Scout leader. When my son, a few years before, my son had decided to join Boy Scouts, and something different for me. I didn't last very long in Boy Scouts myself when I was a young one, but my son wanted to go in Boy Scouts. Maybe it was the uniforms. Daddy wore a uniform, so maybe he wanted to. But in any case, he did. And when I took him to join, they asked me if I wanted to be a leader, and I said, well, I can't really. I'm in the Navy. I'm going to be overseas. I've got deployments coming up. Probably just wouldn't be a good choice. And they said, okay, that's fine. And they don't keep your children proud if you can't be a leader. And somebody else said he wanted to be a leader. and he had. I used to say it lasted 6 weeks. My wife said it was more like 2 weeks, and he quit. He couldn't make it anymore, and his son dropped out not long afterwards. He may have moved. I don't know. He was also in the military. And since I was his assistant, I became the leader. And
oh wow!
So 10 years later, I was still a scout leader. And in between those two, the beginning and the end of my scout experience, one of the other scout leaders, my assistant den leader, as my son was in Cub Scouts, worked for the same company I did, in a whole different division, a different part of the company. And he often, asked me more than once, asked me if I wanted to come over to his part of the company. He could always use people with my skill sets, and I said, well, I've got this plan, I got that plan. We were talking about forcing things earlier, and I was always trying to push my way into a management job or something else, or another career entirely. And I had all kinds of things I wanted to try and do. Well, as time goes on, I got to my time, and one of the things you'll find with veterans is that we tend to have about a 3-year shelf life, and we start looking for something else because it's time to rotate. And somewhere between 2 and 4 years, we're ready to rotate and go do something else, and that doesn't go away when you become a civilian. It just changes nature because it's not built in anymore. And my customer had been doing the same thing over and over and over, and I've been trying to get him to change, and I finally told him what I really thought. I had to find another job. My customer said they didn't really want me on the contract anymore. And my boss, who was one of my heroes in life, gave me plenty of time to find another job and was helping me in doing all the things you need to do. But I called up my assistant scoutmaster and said, Joe, I need a job. And he said, I need a tester. And I said, hire me. And he said, okay. Now, there was more to it than that, in that I also had to talk to HR and the recruiters and those kind of folks, and had to do real interviews with somebody else to check the box. But I got a really nice pay raise, too, when I made that transition. And the key part of that is that it was networking that wasn't aimed at my professional plans. It was networking that happened because I was part of an enterprise for a long period of time, and I was a leader in that enterprise. I wasn't just showing up and dropping my son off at the door and driving away, and having once every year spending a weekend camping with the things. I was with these other adults who were also leaders once a week, sometimes twice a week, and we went camping together, and we spent lots of time. We knew each other. There was depth to this. We were very different. He's a software manager. We happen to work for the same company, so we had similarities. But he's a software manager. He's a manager. We're not the same. We were different. But those differences allowed me, when it came time, to go help him and him to help me. And it was the differences that were the key to this.
Okay, very good. Well, that's awesome. That's one of those things too, is trying to help people, looking for their weaknesses and putting your strengths to fit that.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, very good. So that I was going to ask you who has influenced you and why or how, and I was just wondering, since you said you talked about your boss, being your hero in that story, is that somebody who
absolutely.
You would like to say has influenced you?
That's good observation. Yes, Bob Miller was his name. I've had a lot of good bosses. I've had some ones right out of Office Space. Also, we all do. You survive those, but I had some just winning bosses, and they all. I have to say, one of the things they almost all had in common is they had been enlisted people in the service and became officers, and even after that, they still remained that kind of person. They were strivers with but natural, not artificial. They weren't pushed that way. In Bob's case, Bob had been in the Navy for 25 years before he became an engineer, and had been a young enlisted guy, and been in Vietnam and done all the things that our generation before us did, before me did, and tough times, and continued a career in the service and became a warrant officer and became a LDO, a limited duty officer, and then retired from the service and went into aerospace. And when I worked for him, he was the guy that he was the gentlest soul in the world. And from the time I knew him, we talked a lot. I knew that was not always the case with him. He had not been that way when he was a young man, but he was the gentlest soul. He looked out for us. I think one of the times I did something at a meeting with the other company that we work with, I said and did something. I was pissed off and said what I really thought. Hey, you see a theme here?
Yeah.
And it was obvious it was the wrong direction, and he cut off everything and he said, "Okay, let's go." And we walked out.
Oh.
And by the time we walked down the hallway, I had had time to think about my behavior, and I thought, "Oh, that was bad." And I walked in the office and I said, "That was bad, wasn't it?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what are we going to do?" He said, "Oh, it'll work out." He didn't chew me out.
Simple advice.
Yeah, he didn't hold the resentment. He just told me we'll work it out. And yes, it was bad behavior. He didn't let me off the hook with, forgiving the behavior. The behavior was bad. I needed to change the way I was dealing with those people. And but he didn't get angry or anything else. He was very gentle. I think he was a little frustrated with me, but he was very gentle. And I have thought about this, and I act on it. I try to remember to kind of treat people the way Bob treated me, with respect and support and gentleness.
All right. Yeah, it definitely sounds like he did have that influence on you, impacting influence that's going to benefit other people as well. So, thank you. Now, what books have you gifted the most? Given to other people, or that you've read that influenced your life, even if it's just one or two.
One or two. Oh boy, such limits. There are so many really good books for that I've read. I'm a reader in the first place, and I'm fond of reading things where people are trying to show me how to do stuff, whether it's improving myself in sales, which is we're all salesmen, is what I always say. First thing you have to do in life is sell your mom on feeding you. It's a fairly simple process, and it's not a hard sale, but it's the first thing you do.
Right.
But there are also, so many other things that are important and struggles in life, especially in our modern society. One of the things that we have kind of more limits, I think, than when I was young, is spirituality. And it's very hard to bring spirituality into life, into business. Folks that have a religion may or may not have spirituality to go with their religion. So it's really hard to have a conversation about it, because religions kind of inherently have a lot of dichotomies between the different religions, and especially major faiths. But even within minor variations of faith, they have differences. So it's hard to have conversations about that allow you to help more than one person. But there are some good, simple spiritual things. One of them that I find just vitally important, and it's probably the book I've gifted the most and suggested the most. It's called The Four Agreements. It's written by Don Miguel Ruiz. And one of the things I like about it is there's only 4 of them. Unlike the 12 steps in recovery and the 10 commandments in the Bible, there's only 4. I can usually remember 4 things. And I often suggest that. And when a friend does, in fact, read it, I can often help them work through building on it. It seems so simple. It's a very easy read. A slow reader can read it in a day or two. A fast reader can read it in an hour or two. So it's not it's a weekend read at most. But I've spent a lifetime trying to really get the depth of that. I probably read that book when it first came out, which I want to say was 20 years ago. It might have been more or less. And I've continued to study it. Sometimes I've taken courses in it. I reread it. I read other people's writing about it, because there's just these 4 small, simple, seemingly simple agreements just have depth. And they don't counter people's religions, which allows everybody to get a feel of this, whether you're atheist or Catholic. Or Muslim or anything, it doesn't run counter to that. They're very much within the feelings you have for that. So that's one, and I gift that often. In professional growth, all professions have some things they have to do, and so I read a book a few years ago, and again, in a similar manner, I've reread this many times. It's called The Art of Asking. And right at the moment, I can't remember the author's name, but the book is called The Art of Asking. And it's a book about how to ask questions. The man is a master question asker, and it covers kind of good ways to ask questions, bad ways to ask questions, ways to steer questions that are going when other people are using poor questioning techniques. It helps you identify power play questions and questions that are just inappropriate, and so you can learn what not to do as well as what to do. The last time I was preparing for a job, sort of a job interview. It wasn't exactly that. I had been offered the job essentially already within the company, and I really didn't exactly want it, but I wasn't going to say no. I'm senior, and I don't feel like I needed to, or like I should say no. But I definitely wanted to not kind of get in a spot I'd been for with similar jobs. So I was getting ready to go on vacation, and when I came back from vacation, I was actually going to take the job. So shortly thereafter, and so while I was on vacation, I sat down and wrote 20 questions to ask when we met. We were going to meet right after that, and I had 20 questions to ask that got to the heart and soul of the things that I considered to be the most important, and would likely be the most important to my boss, so I would understand how we work together. And it just goes. There's thousands of times every day there are places that one should have the bravery to ask questions. And the Four Agreements kind of talks about having that bravery, and the Art of Asking gives you the actual tools to use that bravery.
Okay. Now I've heard of a book, is it by Amanda Palmer?
I'm sorry?
Not familiar. Is it by Amanda Palmer?
Well, the book I read, The Art of Asking, isn't by Amanda Palmer, but...
Oh, okay. One that I've heard of myself, so I was just wondering if it was that one. But, all right, well, thank you. That's I'll put some links to these books too as well for people to look up, and so I'll make sure we get the right book called The Art of Asking. Okay. Any others? You said you had a lot. I don't know if you want to list any others or. Is there any
there's so many other books. Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it has been critical to my life. I first read it when I was a teenager. My aunt pulled it off of her shelf and handed it to me when I was having normal teenage difficulties.
Yeah.
And
it's a good time for it.
Yes, and I'll have to find the complete title for The Art of Asking. I can see where that's coming. I actually have it in my e-reader. I'll dig it up and get the name to you.
Okay.
Get the author's name. I'm sitting here looking at this, and yes, all of it comes to the Amanda Palmer's book, but that's a whole different book. Haven't read it. Might be a wonderful book, but I haven't read it.
Okay.
Yeah, Dale Carnegie's book is one of my favorites, and but there are always books that are worth the read as you go along. Like I said, I've probably reread those 3 books more than most other things, but the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a useful thought exercise. As I said, there are dozens of other books like that that just give you depth in developing the leader that you want to become. And a lot of these help for transitioning military because they look at interpersonal relationships in a different manner than we are taught in the service. Now, for a lot of people, going back to how they did things before they were in the service seems to be easier. The longer you're in the service, obviously, the harder it is. But I watch my young veterans that I work with, and they sometimes struggle with having conversations because they've got this whole military clipped, get to the point and get done and go on. And then, so they're engineers who were in the military. This is a toxic combination in some respects.
Oh yeah.
Nothing that can't be worked with. I mean, they're good people, so it's a matter of just kind of a bit of education and a willingness to learn.
Okay, that's very great. That's books. Lots of great books out there, I know, and that's why I love to ask people what has influenced their life or, what is given. So, yeah, I appreciate your time on that one. So 4 well-thought-out books there. So, sure listeners will be able to glean a lot of information out of there if they take some time, or maybe they have taken some time to read some of those. So I have one more question if you have time. And it's just kind of off-the-wall question, but just gives me a little bit of interesting information. And if you could have a billboard, one of those big billboards by the side of the road, where would you put it and why? And, where, meaning, kind of in the world or in the country or in the city you live in or anything like that. Where would you put it and what would it say?
Well, it could be anywhere as long as it had good traffic. Might be a nice one for out on the open road someplace where you have time to think after you read it. In the city we're so busy and the next piece of information is jumping out at you. But sometimes you're out on the open highway between here and Las Vegas and one of those stretches that doesn't really have anything, and there's one billboard. And that billboard should say, "You are loved."
You are loved. Okay.
It's the thing I found that people forget the most, and sometimes maybe never really knew it, never have known it, and haven't found the way to who it is that does love them. But by and large, we have people who loved us or love us now, and it's sometimes hard to remember that.
Okay.
I've come that's the thing that I most often say to people when they're having difficulty, or even when they're not, I'll give them a hug, and hold them for a moment. I'm a world-class hugger. Not that everybody likes that, so I'm really good at identifying people who don't want to be hugged. I'm not out to hug people who don't want to be hugged, but if they want to hug, get a hug from me until they're done. And people tell you when they're done. They do something, and you go, oh, they're done. And it's rare that somebody can hug me longer than I can hug them.
Interesting.
and when people are having difficulties, and that's men and women, by the way, and it's just what it is. Men tend to only hug for a moment. My children are over that. They've gotten so they're men now, but they've gotten used to it. But when people are having difficulties, while I hug them, or just before I finish hugging them, I whisper that in their ear. You are loved.
Okay.
It's not I love you. It's not your mom loves you. It's you are loved. And it may be the universe that loves you more than anything, because we are all part of this universe, and there's a lot of love in this universe.
Right. Understandable. Well, very good. Well, that's great. I appreciate that. And that's the last question I have. How could my listeners get in touch with you if they were interested in maybe working with you, if they're transitioning military, or you're somebody that's maybe in the military that's looking to become a speaker or something like that? How would they get in touch with you? What's the preferred way for you?
LinkedIn is fantastic. My LinkedIn handle is Ray Rogers 10. You can, and if you just do a search for Ray Rogers, and San Diego would help you, but Ray Rogers 10 should find me on LinkedIn. I'm in the middle of transitioning my website. My current website is rayrogers10.com, but I'm transitioning that to rayrogers.us. But rayrogers.us isn't up today. But when your listeners listen to it, it may be. And once the transition is done, rayrogers10.com will forward to rayrogers.us, so don't worry about it. Rayrogers.us is where we're going to be. Okay. And it'll have further contact information, as well as ongoing blog articles about the kind of things we're talking about today, and video pieces, as well as contact information.
Okay, awesome. All right. What about Twitter and other social networks like that?
I'm on Twitter. It's also Ray Rogers 10. Facebook, Ray Rogers 10. The only thing that's not Ray Rogers 10 besides my website right now is YouTube, and I think that's one of those trying to deal with the universe. It's 10 Ray Rogers, and there are some videos on there. They tend to be short, so as not to drag people into long pieces. So my website's probably the best place to get a hold of me. Website and LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn, and I try to answer messages right away. So you can message me there, and there's a pretty good chance I'll get back to you within a day or two. Obviously, there's some limits on the universe.
Okay. And then last thing is any last things, any parting words for the listeners there that, anything you'd like to tell them, or anything you'd like them to do, as far as just somebody that might be listening right now. Is there anything lastly that you would like to have them do or know?
Sure, there's a couple of things. One of the things I didn't talk about is an organization called psycharmor.org. And like psych as in psychology, and armor like as in armor on armor. And they have a training piece. They're a little awkward. The website's a little awkward. You have to sign in. You have to get an account. But it's they have a lot of training for professionals. But they have a short piece called 1551 or 5151, and you'll recognize it by those three numbers in the title. And if you have veterans, active duty military, people who have deployed, people who have not deployed, you have military people, prior military or current military in your life, go there, spend the hour on 515.1, and it will enhance your ability to communicate not only with your own veterans but with military parts of your family and friends, but with people you meet in the future. It'll give you the questions that you really should ask and the questions you shouldn't ask and the things that we as veterans want you to know.
Okay. That sounds like a very good resource, very helpful for a lot of people.
Yes.
So, all right. I'll make sure that's also in the show notes so people can link to, or, click right on and go right to it. And that's it. Ray, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I know that this has been special for me to be able to ask you these questions and provide hopefully something of value to other people. And I hope that that your time is valuable, and I know that. And I hope that this was worth your time here, as I know it probably was. And I appreciate your time because I know you're busy, and time is one of those resources that we cannot get back, and everybody, I hope, will use that. My son actually is in Australia, and he called me, he texted me the other day and asked me if I knew what 1440, what was the importance of that. So I looked it up real quick, and it was the number of minutes in a day, and he said, yes, that's what I'm talking about. There's only 1,440 minutes in a day, so how are you going to use those minutes? And I appreciate you giving us a few of those minutes today. So
yeah, I don't feel like I gave them up. This is valuable. You asked really good questions. I really appreciate you asking those questions, and I look forward to going on your site and listening to some of the other interviewees and the answers to these questions. I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you very much for doing this. This is really a blessing.
All right, you're welcome, and thank you again. And I'll talk to you some other time. Have a great night, and for you listeners there, I appreciate your time listening to this as well, as I know your time is valuable. My goal is that you get some kind of value out of this, and please comment below if you have something you'd like to know more, and please contact Ray Rogers if you're looking for help in that transition. And my contact information, of course, will be right under this. So thank you again. Have a great day, and we'll see you next week.